This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi, and you're watching The Gist. Today, our guest is, or should I say our host, since we are at the Embassy of Mexico in New Delhi, is Ambassador Federico Salas. Lotfe.
Yes.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Gracias.
Ambassador, I'm sorry, I don't know too much French except for that from my travels.
Spanish, I hope.
Spanish, I beg your pardon. But thank you so much for your time. And I think it's an extremely opportune moment that you've given us this interview, because the External Affairs Minister has visited Mexico, the first in 41 years. Now, that's unbelievable, considering India wants and Mexico wants to raise their relationship, from to a strategic one, right?
That is correct, yes. No, we were very happy that this visit was made possible. Originally, the idea was for the foreign minister to come to Mexico around August, but he had to, because of the developments in the region, he had to come back to Delhi. So we were very happy that it was possible to reschedule it for this time. And as you said, even though it's the first visit by a foreign affairs minister of India to Mexico in 41 years, which is not to say that there have not been other high-level visits. The last Prime Minister Modi was in Mexico
2016.
In 2016. So the high-level contacts have taken place all along. But anyway, this was very important, and we were very keen to receive Minister Jaishankar in Mexico. He has been a proponent of enhancing the relationship that India has with Latin America. And in the case of Mexico, I think this is particularly important, because in the past few years, Mexico has become, just to talk about the economic area, the first trading partner of India in Latin America, the second in the Americas only after the United States. And India has become amongst the first, the ninth trading partner of Mexico worldwide. So this is tremendously important. Mexico is also, for example, the top investor from Latin America in India. And there are over 80 Indian companies that are present in Mexico doing business in all sorts of different sectors. So there's a very good and thriving economic relationship. And of course, there's also high-level political dialogue. Our two foreign ministers held what we call the binational commission. Consultations was held in a virtual fashion almost a year ago in October of 2020. Of course, because of the pandemic, this could not happen. And I'm also happy to say that our foreign minister has been, on a number of occasions, has had plans to come to India, but different circumstances. For example, the last time was in May, but of course, because of the second wave here in India, the trip had to be postponed. But I'm sure he will make it here sometime in the not-so-distant future.
And it's extra significant. You have 3 significant celebrations this year,
correct,
right?
Yes.
It's not just the 200th anniversary of independence.
That is correct. This year in Mexico, we were very happy to have 3, very significant historical celebrations. 700 years of the foundation of what was then the Aztec city of what is now Mexico City. 500 years since the actual city was founded itself, and also the resistance of the indigenous population with the Europeans coming into the American continent, and 200 years since the end of our independence war back in 1821. So this was a very significant time, and so we're doubly happy that Minister Jaishankar was able to be there. He addressed the large audience that was present during the celebrations that were being held in Mexico City. We were very happy about that. He not only had a conversation on a wide range of issues with our foreign minister, but also met the president of Mexico and met with the business community of India, the Mexico-India Chamber of Commerce in Mexico, was able to present his respects to the monument to Mahatma Gandhi that we have in Mexico City, So overall, I think it was a very well-rounded visit. He also had the opportunity to visit the archaeological site of Teotihuacan, just outside of Mexico City, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a very impressive place. So we're very happy that he was able to make that.
In terms of foreign policy now, a lot of thinking in this region, and especially whether it's America or Europe, I beg your pardon, is about the Indo-Pacific.
Yes.
Now, the Indo-Pacific as a concept, at least India's concept of it, is all the way from the eastern shores of Africa to the western shores of America, which would obviously be Mexico as well. How does Mexico see the Indo-Pacific as a concept?
Well, that is a very good point. I think that, not only Mexico, but the other sort of Pacific countries of the Americas were beginning to realize the importance of this new concept. As up to a few years ago, Mexico and other countries, we're part of APEC, which is the Organization of the Pacific Basin. We're very
also the Pacific Alliance, which is
there's also the Pacific Alliance, which is Colombia, Peru, Mexico, and Chile. So we're beginning also to focus more on our attention to this part of the world. And even though we don't necessarily have we don't have a military presence or a security interest here in the military sense, but we do have a lot of interest in this region because a lot of our trade and commercial avenues are in the Indo-Pacific region. So that is tremendously important. And as you correctly say, it goes from the eastern shore of Africa to the western shore of the Americas. So that includes us, and we're more and more beginning to become engaged with our Indian friends and others who are interested in sort of giving more shape to the concept of the Indo-Pacific. That will be an area where there is maritime security, where there is free and the free flow of trade vehicles in all sorts, and of course also security in the military sense.
So, like Mexico would. Whether it's freedom of navigation, whether it's the rule of law.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of questioning of it may be China focused because of the problems in the area. Everybody has problems with how China has been behaving. But overall, Mexico would agree with that concept, that structure, right? Because of trade.
Well, Mexico, overall, our foreign policy has always been very clear in the sense that there should be, a clear rule of law, respect for international law. We were tremendously active and one of the main actors in the conception and creation of the law of the sea back in the 80s. And so we're very keen in that all of these aspects of international law be respected anywhere in the world, regardless of who's participating. And we certainly hope that all states be committed to this a rule-based international system.
Masa, you mentioned trade a lot earlier as well, bilateral between India and Mexico. 2018, I think it reached its peak, which is about 10 billion, right?
It was, yes, exactly.
So it's fallen since then.
Well, of course, after that, this trade has ups and downs overall, but then, of course, the pandemic struck, and so we've had a lull. We're working now, of course, with the idea of giving it a new impulse, a new push to bring it back to pre-pandemic levels, and not only bring it back, but also increase it. And we're very hopeful that is going to be the case. I have been having conversations with many of the business executives from India that have a presence in Mexico, and they're all not only very happy with what has been happening to their business ventures in Mexico, but some of them are expanding or looking to, increase their footprint in Mexico. And we're also looking at the possibility of more Mexican businesses coming to India. And I think that this is one of the messages that the foreign minister brought to the attention of the business people that gathered yesterday morning in Mexico City with him.
From NAFTA, it's metamorphosed now to USMCA.
Right.
They have, Mexico and the other countries involved, the US and Canada, are evolving that structure itself. Is it more complicated than saying that Mexico could become, say, a gateway to both Latin America and the Americas because of that for trade? Or is that too simple?
It's not complicated at all. It's very simple. Mexico is a gateway. We are located within the North American market with Canada and the United States as our partners since the early 90s. The new agreement came into force last year. And it's basically, was the NAFTA agreement that was updated, was revised, was brought to date. Because back in the days when it was negotiated in the early 90s, there were certain issues, for example, like e-commerce did not exist in those days. So all of these things had to be brought, and it's still probably the most up-to-date and state-of-the-art free trade agreement that exists in the world. But we also have many other free trade agreements with a large number of, I think it's 41 countries with whom we're associated, including all of the European Union with all its 27, 28 members. And I think one interesting fact that I think it's important to note is that even though Mexico's population is 126 million, which is basically 1/10 of the population of India, the reach that we have of market access
through all these
thanks
FTAs,
to our FTAs is almost equivalent to the size of the population of India, 1.3 billion people. So that makes Mexico particularly attractive in terms of trade, in terms of investment, and as you correctly say, as a gateway. Coming back to what you were mentioning earlier of the Indo-Pacific, we have very important ports on the Pacific coast of Mexico that we hope will also become a means of access to the commercial routes coming from this part of the world into the Americas. And extending to other parts, not only of America, but even to the other side, to the Atlantic.
Give us an idea of how much, say, Mexico is trading with China. I mean, in comparison to, say, with India or the other FTAs.
Well, the situation with China is a curious one because, we do have a healthy and growing relationship with China, but in many ways, we are somewhat of a competitor with China, with the U.S. market. Mexico is today the largest trading partner of the United States. And of course, China, I think, is number 2 at any one point. So we're competitors with China, but fortunately, we're winning so far.
Okay. In terms of other cooperation, where a forum where India and Mexico are both present is the United Nations Security Council. Where
correct, yes.
For 2 years, both on permanent members. We were president in August as well. What kind of cooperation could take place within the United Nations is taking place?
Well, we've had, I think, probably the longest and more significant contacts and cooperation that we've had with India since India's independence has been in multilateral fora, particularly in the United Nations. And of course, what is very important today is that we both entered the Security Council in January of this year. As you correctly said, India was presiding the Security Council in August. Mexico's term will come in November, when Mexico will be presiding the Security Council. And we have been supportive of India's priorities that it presented to the Council, such questions as maritime security and the fight against terrorism. And we certainly hope that India would also be cooperating, and I'm sure of that, with the priorities that Mexico has set for its presidency in 2 months' time. And but there is, of course, the Security Council, but there's other forums that brings us together. We're all both parts of the G20,
right.
And as you know, India will be presiding the G20 in 2023. So we're also working very closely with our Indian friends in setting up the priorities of the agenda for the G20, because it is a very large, influential group in setting the agenda, in the priorities and the priorities in a more global level. Issues such as, of course, climate change, but also questions of security, including the fight against terrorism, but also financial stability and development issues that are very, very important. And one crucial element right now is the whole question of the recovery post-pandemic, and at the same time, guaranteeing the sort of equitable distribution and acceptance of vaccines and medications. Mexico is actually has brought and will bring to the summit of the G20 in Rome a specific proposal that all the vaccines that have been recognized by the WHO, the World Health Organization, should be equally accepted by everybody, that there should be no discrimination. And this is something that we're working closely with India and others to guarantee that happens, so that we don't end up with a more inequitable world because of this health situation. I mean, the situation was already bad because of that. We need to make it better. We need to work together. I think it's the best example that we've had, that we can only address this kind of issues if we all work together with a sense of solidarity and equity. And this is very important. And this is an issue that we're working together with India.
Amitabh, Salas, when you're talking about vaccines, there were reports about manufacturing of vaccines in Mexico.
Correct.
With Indian help. And are you part of the TRIPS movement where India and South Africa, and I think it was Brazil, had asked for a waiver of patents? It's not going anywhere, I think, in that forum.
Yeah, no, we have expressed our support in principle to that question, that proposal by India and South Africa, and of course that does not depend just on us. It's
Absolutely.
a multilateral decision. We have in Mexico, we have been producing together with Argentina the vaccine of AstraZeneca, and the production is going to be taking place in Mexico. And we're also working on what will be our own vaccine that will be made in Mexico, but that's still in the pipeline. That is not yet out in the. It has to be tested, and of course, later go to the market. But at the same time, we have been, of course, trying to access and get vaccines from different parts of the world. We have purchased from different countries, including India, at the beginning of the year, and we have also benefited from some of the vaccines that the U.S. government has donated to different countries, including Mexico.
You were talking about being supportive to India, talking about the region. I was stunned when I saw reports of what's happening in Afghanistan is clearly focused, everywhere.
Correct.
The girls' robotic team was given refugee status. Your foreign secretary has been pushing for Afghans who want to leave to gain entry into Mexico. It seems stupendous. Absolutely lovely, of course. But why would Mexico... why not?
Mexico has a long tradition of offering refugee status to peoples from different parts of the world. Of course, in many cases, it has been people with whom there has been some historical affinity. In the case of people from Central and South America, for example, from Spain during the Civil War in the 30s of last century, but not exclusively. So this is sort of there's a continuity, there's a consistency in our position all of these years. One of the things that was interesting in this case is, of course, there were these women from Afghanistan that work on robotics, but we also gave shelter and refuge in Mexico to the families, to the journalists and families of those journalists that were working for foreign venues in Afghanistan, for the New York Times, from the Wall Street Journal. Some of them may not be staying in Mexico very long. Those two newspapers want to eventually bring these people to either to the United States or Canada. I don't exactly know what is going to be their future. But in the meantime, Mexico was very supportive of that. And I think we have received close to 1,000 people from Afghanistan and so far.
And India and Mexico's ties go back, centuries, it's civilisational. But even now, there's art, there's culture, there's food. There's a lot that both sides really can, gain from, right?
Indeed, yes. No, our contacts go back certainly a few centuries. There's a traditional figure in Mexico called La China Poblana, which is basically it's a woman's dress that is very colorful and full of things and bangles and things that hang and
the roots go back to an Indian.
It was an Indian woman. It was an Indian woman back. I think it was the 17th century. As you know, there was this route called that eventually left these ships that their last port was Manila on this side of the world, and eventually went to Acapulco on the Pacific coast of Mexico. This trading route went on for a couple of centuries, and there was enormous influence coming from this part of the world to Mexico, as well as from Mexico to India. When I arrived in India 2 years ago, I was very surprised to see these orange flowers that are used in temples here, the marigolds. And I said to myself, this resembles very much to something that we have in Mexico. And indeed, it's this flower is called cempasúchil in Mexico, and is used in Mexico, especially on our this celebration that we have each November on the Day of the Dead,
right.
Which is also a religious, quasi-religious celebration that we have in Mexico. Well, this flower that you have here in India came from Mexico, and is now, of course, you see it every day and everywhere in India. So so this kind of ties and contacts go way back. Not many people know these stories, but they're there. And of course, throughout history, there has been a lot of contacts. At the beginning of the 20th century, many of the revolutionaries of India were inspired by the revolutionaries of Mexico. We had a revolution back from 1910 to 1920. There were other very good examples. For example, the Green Revolution was brought from Mexico in agricultural issues, was brought here to India. And to this day, we're still collaborating. The institute that was founded by the Nobel Prize winner Borlaug, that won the Nobel Prize because of the Green Revolution, that institute in Mexico has branches here in India. We're still working together in the improvement of crops and all sorts of things to fight hunger and improve the productivity of agricultural fields.
I don't know whether we could help you if you were interested in cricket. You can certainly help us with football. I know we need to go up the FIFA rankings a lot. But Ambassador Salas, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time on StratNews.
Thank you very much. My pleasure, and thank you to all your audience.
And do send us your feedback on this interview if you want to have any questions answered about India-Mexico ties or any other strategic issues. You have our address. You can also support us. There is a link in our YouTube descriptor. Follow our social media handles as well on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This is The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.